I don't think really anyone should pay attention to comments or discourse about themselves on the internet, particularly if they are someone who receives a moderate amount of attention. Like, even if there is just a couple hundred people who orbit you or find some minor interest in you, I think it's for the best not to pay attention to the things that they have to say, unless you just find it really funny or uh, interesting, or you're able to kind of integrate the various things that uh, other people have to say about you into like your content or your image in a positive kind of way. That's all fine and good. You do you if that's your approach. But I think in general, it's for the best not to pay attention to that kind of thing, because it has a real good chance of just completely messing up your head. Um, Now, obviously, as a YouTuber, it's something that I can't really avoid because I have comments on my videos. But one of the things that I try my best to remember is that people who comment on videos have an extremely skewed perspective on things, in that they can selectively choose to believe what pieces of information you put out there, and not believe other pieces of information you put out there. So they can basically create their own stories. And um, even if everything you put out there is 100% accurate, and you haven't changed your opinions on anything, your views on anything, or uh, how you see this or that issue as it pertains to yourself, um, it's not going to matter to those people, because they're going to have a narrative that sounds more convincing to them that they've invented themselves. Um, and even if like everything you put out there was entirely authentic, never prone to contradiction, never prone to revision, those people still wouldn't have an accurate perception of you, because everything that they think about you would be filtered through the narrow scope of a view that is your channel. This is like, when you look at someone's YouTube channel, it's almost kind of like you're getting tunnel vision, because you can only see what directly lies before you there. You don't see everything that's around. You don't see everything that is surrounding the immediate picture that you're fixated on. Um, and I think that causes a lot of problems in terms of like people's, I mean, of course, this has been talked about a million ways to Sunday. I'm not making a unique point, but especially young people, it causes great problems to their mental health, because there are all of these people with opinions about you and thoughts on the things that you have to say, that are coming from a completely misinformed standpoint, because the only thing that they can see is what's on your videos, and what's on your videos doesn't necessarily portray an accurate version of yourself, especially if you're like me, someone who's liked to do thought experiments, play characters, mess with the truth. And unfortunately, there was a time on my channel when I did lie a fair bit about myself, simply because I thought it made my stories more interesting, or myself more captivating to my audience. And I've had to do revisions of those things here in the present. But of course, when I actually uh, go on the record to say that I lied about various things, people will take my uh, revisions and new statements to be lies in and of themselves. They'll say that I'm, going for a more convenient narrative, that I have some strange incentive behind all of this, when I don't really think there's any incentive to outing yourself as a liar. Like, going with the same story is generally going to be your best bet if you want to be a credible figure to other people and be liked and get more subscribers and more attention on the internet, doing the thing that'll actually shed you fans or viewers, which is what I've done, which is to call out myself and correct my own lies and mistellings, um, is not something that's generally recommended if you don't have to do it. Like if there's not a scandal on the horizon and you're going to be called out by somebody else, uh, people don't recommend to do that. I have preferred to do things that way because I prefer to be as authentic as I can when I'm making these more serious videos. But there's always going to be some amount of people who don't take a logical reading home from these videos. They don't look at it in a reasonable way, and so they see Guy correcting themselves and trying to be humble and apologize, and then think, well, no, actually, actually, this person telling on themselves is lying by telling on themselves, and the things that they said before were actually the things that were true. It's very, very strange. Um, but these are the kinds of conclusions that people reach on the internet. There's not really anything that you can do about that. Like, you can turn comments off, sure, but if you do that, then you're not going to see the positive things that people have to say. You're not going to see the feedback that is often in good faith, and even some of the feedback that isn't worded the nicest, that's stronger. Maybe I don't agree with the style. On the substance, they could still have some pretty important things to say that are worth looking at and are potentially worth applying to improve the content. So comments are super important. I don't think I'd ever turn those off, even if I was getting, a million comments a day that were just evil, vile and evil. They're too vital of a resource for me. And that's part of why I've taken to internalizing this idea that, like, the image that I put out there on the internet is not me. And it's going to be filtered through a certain perspective, the perspective that is, a person watching YouTube videos that I have intentionally curated, created, and uploaded to the internet. That's only showing you a very specific side of someone. And in that, you could, potentially be deceiving people in a million and one ways, but the viewer doesn't necessarily know that. Um, and again, even if you're being wholly honest, just the fact that you're making a YouTube video is going to portray a different enough version of oneself to make a significant impact. Like, you really think I'm always on in the way that I am in these videos? No, a lot of the time I'm just sitting around thinking about random stuff, saying absolutely nothing. A lot of my day is just spent sitting at my chair, playing Counter-Strike. Like, this is a simulated version of reality, but it's also unreal to varying extents. And so I internalized that a long time ago, particularly when, like, I started leaning into uh, more, falsehoods and untrue things about my backstory and biography. Really, it was just little details, which are things that I've gone over in vlogs in the past, particularly in my gender playlist. But to this day, these things are sort of being brought up to me as, actual statements of truth. And there's not really anything you can do about that, right? If I didn't want that to happen, I wouldn't have played a character online to begin with. Um, but of course, you can't undo the past. You can only uh, take a better approach going into the future. And so, I made a clear decision, which was to be more honest about who I was and about myself. And ultimately, some people will, it's like with any person that you may encounter in the world, some people are going to accept that and other people will not. But the most vital thing is to tell the truth. And if you see people who are misrepresenting you, acting in bad faith, acting with vitriol and so on, it's important to remember that you did the best that you could. You know, you were authentic, you stayed true to yourself, and people can take that or leave that. They can falsely accuse you of not telling the truth, but ultimately you're going to go to sleep at night knowing that you did the best that you could and that you told the truth where you could. And that if other people have all these wacky thoughts about you, that's okay. It's just one person's perspective. This is kind of a golden rule on the internet. Like, it's something that, if you engage in social media or put yourself out there, you need to understand. People are always going to have their own bizarre ideas or purported ideas about you, but it's because they're viewing you in unreal fashion. And it could cut just the other way as well. I mean, how do I know that the things that these people are stating online are necessarily even their real opinions? How do I know that they're reflective of any thought that they've authentically had? How do I know that they're not just generating these things to try and make me or somebody that I care about feel bad? There's actually no way of knowing. Of course, there are certain hints that you might have, like, if someone says something on Twitter, for example, it's probably going to be much more vitriolic than, anything in their normal thoughts, because that is just what people do on Twitter. Like, people take their actual opinion, the substance of it, and they try to dress it up in vitriol and PvP like angst, player versus player angst. And that's how they make their snappy comebacks to try and get at people. Those are the posts that are incentivized on that website, because those are the posts that get the most attention and lead people to feeling like they quote unquote won in a Twitter debate, or that they owned someone. And so that's the kind of content that they put out there in response to you. But is that necessarily reflective of what they really think? Probably not, because they're just playing the game of Twitter. And so this is going to be the case to varying extents, depending on what kind of website you're on and what the install base is like, what the incentive structures are on that website. But the general fact is, you don't necessarily know if what these people are saying is really their beliefs, just because they purport it to be so. They could be doing so in a disingenuous way. And in addition to that, you don't necessarily know who these people are. I mean, you don't know the first thing about them. They're just some person who said something. Even if you were to look at their entire post history from every website they've ever gone on, you still won't really have a picture of what that human is like in the way that you would if you knew them face to face for years and had been told their innermost thoughts, or you had been exposed to them in some other way. So I think very often there is a tendency among users of the internet today to treat all of this like it's a lot more real than it is. And if you find yourself doing that, perhaps this video can help you to try and reverse some of those tendencies in your behavior. But if not, it's just time to log off. And we would probably all be better if we did a little more of that.